It's Not a Boy. Chapter 5. Aunty Cecily and the Lamb. Part 3. Then one night, soon after the parcel had arrived, Mum and Dad took my two sisters to Ringham to see Aunty Peggy at Sunnyside. I didn't want to go because I couldn't wait to snuggle down under my new quilt. I went to bed and just waited for them to come back. But they didn't come back. And soon it got darker and darker, and I got more and more frightened. I got out of bed and stood on our bedroom windowsill to look out for the car lights. You see, whenever our car came home, I could see its headlights on the wall. But no lights came. Grandma was next door, and Mum always said, in an emergency, bang on the fire back with the poker. It was back to back with our fire, and Grandma always sat by her fire, so she would surely hear me and come and help. But this wasn't an emergency, was it? I wasn't poorly, and they would surely come back before long. Wouldn't they? I stood on the sill and waited. Soon I was freezing cold, and I had to go back to get warm and took my feet into that mattress crack. I looked over the top of my quilt to see if our car lights were beaming round our wall, but there was nothing, just darkness. They didn't come back. I was very scared now. What if they never came back? I went under my quilt and put my hands down on the sheet, and I found the crack in my mattress to get my charm bracelet, and I put it on. I felt a bit safer. It was then I heard the banging. I stayed still and listened again, but then there was nothing. I couldn't hear a thing. I must have imagined it. Bang, bang! There it was again. Was this an emergency? Should I creep down and knock on the fire back to get Grandma? I could feel the little ballet dancer and Wren dancing round my wrist. Then there was silence, and I was safe again. But the noise came back. Bang, bang, and then there was a scraping. This had to be an emergency now. I'd better go and knock for Grandma. I knew there was nothing else for it but to get help. I crept downstairs and through our stair door and down our passage where my bare feet felt the shock of our cold stone floor. All I had to do was go down the passage and into our room where I'd get the poker and bang on the fire back. But as I was going past our outside door, I felt a draught coming in. A very cold draught. Mum must not have shut the door. Stiff with fear, I shuffled on, and it was then that I tripped and fell with a scream. I fell down onto a soft, woolly paw. Bah, it was only Aunty. Thank goodness I buried my face in his woolly belly and smelt the warm lamb smell. What are you doing here? It's dark and in the middle of the night. I said it in a cross sort of voice, but I can tell you I was very pleased to see him. And I sat down on the cold floor there and then and talked to him. In the dark. Aunty must have kicked the door open. I went and fetched some oats out of my coat pocket, and he got what he'd wanted after all. He ate greedily. It was then I taught Aunty his first trick, just there and then on our cold stone floor in the dark that night. And suddenly it was as if all the darkness had gone, and even though the headlights hadn't come round our wall, I forgot all about our car coming back, and I concentrated on Aunty. Every time he did a trick right, I gave him some food as a reward. All he had to do was lift up his leg like some dogs do and shake hands, and I gave him some more oats. He learned it all in a flash because he was a very clever lamb. We practised for a bit. Then suddenly there were the lights round our wall beaming across. Quick as a flash, I pushed Aunty outside and ran upstairs, got under the bed cover and pretended to go to sleep, which was easy because I fell asleep straight away. I was dreaming of teaching Aunty some more tricks. In the morning, Mum said that she had been talking to Aunty Peggy about her parcel from Aunty Cecily and that she lost all track of time. So everything was all right, and I taught Aunty more tricks. He learnt very quickly. He could stay when I went away and then come running when I clapped my hands. He could jump a little gate I made when I shouted jump. And I set up a little obstacle course for him in our orchard. And he came running when I shouted for him. I was a very good trainer, and I thought that one day I might take him round the villages and show everybody how good we were together, and Aunty would do all his little tricks. I even put a good at training my lamb on my what I am good at list. But I never got to take Aunty round our villages and show my performing lamb, because something awful happened. You see, one day I got off our school bus and Aunty wasn't there waiting for me like he usually was. That's funny, I thought. He was here this morning to see me off to school. I felt for some oats in my old coat pocket and shouted, Aunty, Aunty! But I got all the way down our lane to our house and my lamb didn't come. I looked in the paddock, but he wasn't there. Oh, I thought maybe he's just doing one of his hiding tricks. But when I clapped my hands, he didn't come, and I got really worried. Mum was calling me for tea, and I still hadn't seen Aunty. I was getting frantic. But to calm myself, I remembered that last time I was worried, there was a perfectly good reason, and everything was all right soon. But everything wasn't all right this time. I can't find Aunty, Ma'am. Have you seen him? I asked, and I sat down for tea. Oh, your dad took him to market today and sold him, she said, serving lamb chops and onions with thick gravy on my plate. The warm lamb smell came up to my nose. What? You sold Aunty, my lifelong friend? Yes, you know that all lambs go to market. We can't afford to keep them forever. Our farm is our livelihood. You know that. Besides, he was getting very rough and he butted everyone. But Aunty, to Hull market, he'll be killed. He's for the chop, he's for the chop. Percy would shout that all round the villages, and it should have been me taking Aunty, performing his tricks and showing everybody how clever he was, and what a good trainer I was. This will cheer you up, smiled Ma'am. Your lamb was big and fat, and he made a good price at market, and your dad said you can have some of the money to buy a new coat from a posh shop in Hull. So you've got what you wanted after all. I could have a new coat from a posh shop in Hull instead of my lifelong friend. I ran upstairs, leaving my chop and gravy to go cold, and I lay in my bed and stared hopelessly at little Bo Peep without her sheep. I reached down the mattress crack to get my bracelet, but it was no comfort this time. The night came, and it got darker and darker, and now Aunty had gone, and no lights would ever shine again in the darkness. My friend had gone forever, and he would never come back. I couldn't live another day. I did live another day, of course, and daylight did come, as it always does. Then one winter, my Mum said we would go to the new shop in Hull and replace my old threadbare coat. Mum and me got on the bus and went. This is what I'd always wanted, to buy a new coat from a shop at last. But I kept thinking of Aunty and me going round our villages showing his little tricks. I could have a new coat at the cost of my lamb's life. Of course, I was so sad that I couldn't choose, so in the end, Mum decided for me. My new coat was the colour of Aunty Cecily's, and my eyes jumped at the blood red, and I blinked fiercely as I put it on. Thank goodness it didn't have an astrakhan collar. It was velvet. That night I lay in bed listening to Mum's sewing machine. Rattle, 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 and then it got up at top speed. Rrrr, it went. Now I just knew that when it was my turn again to have a coat or any clothes by Mam, from scraps of old material, I would not mind one little bit.